Okay, we're gonna look at the decorator pattern today. Okay, so we're gonna look at the UML really quick, just so you have a general idea of what's gonna be happening in the code. So first of all, we have an interface. So we have this interface here, and it's gonna declare the functionality that we're going to be extending. So the decorator pattern is used for extending class functionality. Okay, and so what we have is a concrete class called class B, and it implements the interface, and so it's going to have a function A definition. And then we have our decorators over here. Now this one is an abstract one, but nonetheless, it's a decorator. And so with a decorator class, what you're going to have is it's going to implement the interface, the same interface that you want to extend the functionality on, and then it's going to have an instance of that interface. Okay, so right there, and so that's going to be called wrapped in this instance. Okay, and you can see it's of type int a, which is the same as up here. Okay, so basically a decorator wraps around an interface, and it also holds an object of that interface. So what's going to happen is in our concrete decorators, decorator A and B, it's going to implement that functionality in the interface. And so in that function, you're going to get something that looks like this. It's going to use the wrapped variable, and it's going to, since it's of type interface A, you're going to call the same function, function A. So we're just going to write function A. And so after you've done that, you're going to do some other work. Okay, so you're going to write some other code there. And so that's basically what a decorator is. It just extends this functionality. So it does the original functionality, and then it does some more stuff. And that's what the decorator pattern is used for. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create this example. And here we have a stores inventory. And so it just has all of the items listed out with a name and a quantity. And so if I do a refresh real quick, you can see the original ordering. And then we can order these by using the decorator pattern by clicking these buttons. So that orders it alphabetically by name, and this ascending by quantity. And so let's go ahead and see the code. Okay, here's the code, right? So try to think back to the UML as we go through this. So here's our interface, and it's called inventory, and it just defines one function, and it returns a list of store items. Okay, so a store item is just a name and quantity. So that's all that is. Okay, so that's our interface, and now we have a store. Now this isn't a decorator, it's just a class, right? And it has a array of those items, right? And then it's implementing that interface, so it has to implement the function in that interface, get items. And so it just does that by returning its items, right? So one thing to note is when you implement a interface, that type becomes also the type of the interface. So in this case, the store type becomes an inventory type. So it's kind of both at the same time, right? So now we'll look at the decorator classes. This is our abstract one called sorter. And so it implements the inventory interface like we saw in the UML, but it also gets passed an instance of that interface, and we save that into this variable called inventory, right? And then it also has the functionality from the interface because it's implementing it. But in this case, it's an abstract class, so we don't actually provide a definition. We just mark it as abstract. All right, so that's our abstract decorator class. Now for our concrete decorator classes, we have two. We have the ascending name sorter, and then we have the ascending quantity sorter. All right, so for this one, they're just going to provide the definitions for that function. So here, like we saw in the UML, we're going to, well, it's not really UML, but I showed you. We're going to use that object that we passed in, so inventory. And then we're going to call the common function called get items from that interface. And then in this case, we're going to use those results and just sort them using the name property in this case, and then return that sorted array. And then the other decorator is like the same thing, but it uses the quantity property instead. And so that's the big idea around the decorator pattern. You have, you're implementing the interface, but then you're also passing in an object of that interface. So that's probably the biggest idea around this design pattern. All right, and you use that to extend the functionality. So here, this is just the original function running. So if we pass in a store into this constructor, what's going to happen in that function is we're going to run this function. So that's the original one running right here. And then we're going to extend it. That's why I keep saying extending it by doing this stuff. All right, so with the decorator pattern, you're just extending the functionality. And that's all there is to it. So in the app code, we can look at that. But anyways, here we're creating a new store, right? And we're passing in a few different items. And so then we can pass this store into our decorators. In other words, we can wrap this object with a decorator because it implements the inventory interface. So like I said, once you implement an interface, that class or that type becomes also the type of the interface, which in this case is the inventory interface. So we can pass that into our decorators. So that's going to extend the functionality defined in this object. Okay. And so here you can just figure this out on your own, but we're just basically decorating this object and setting it to this object, and then we're using that in the HTML to list out the items in a specific order. So here's the HTML, and that's really all there is to it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.